Now I will tell you a story. Who I am is not important, however what I have to say is important. Five Nights at Freddy's needs no explanation on what that shit is. Security Breach, the latest game in the series, has DLC coming out, Ruin DLC, and I have a theory, a speculation, one that which may predict the future and outcome of this series, and potentially the true final chapter. However, in order to get there, we need context clues along the way, and so we must go back to Help Wanted to figure out what exactly the story of Security Breach is, as it is indeed a jumble fucking mess. I don't know what the fuck they were thinking when they made that, but they made it a fucking mess. So enough wasting time, let's jump straight into it. FNAF Help Wanted is a story within a story almost. The game treats itself like a sequel. We originally thought it was a reboot, but it turned out to be a sequel and a follow-up to Ultimate Custom Night, which disappointed many fans, I included. However, it may still indeed be a reboot in some way, shape, or form. The story that's being told throughout Help Wanted, all the way to Security Breach, as well as the Bridge of the Gap, which is Special Delivery, has a lot more in store than we may have initially thought. I mean, let's see where we start off in this game. We start off in a ride with Handy Unit telling us all about the Five Nights at Freddy's games and how they were created by a rogue indie developer who is obviously crazy and insane. He's lost his mind. And well, all the shit that you heard from the past, nothing but bad news. Don't believe it. Don't believe the hype. Don't even think about it. Immediately off the bat, this origin story sounds extremely familiar, almost as if we've seen it before. A creator of 3 different places, but a 4th one left in ruin, left in destruction. Having the pieces having to be picked up and put back together because of the broken nature of it. The man is crazy, the man is insane, but the man may have more than we think. Obviously, you know, the man has been portrayed as nobody else but Scott Cawthon himself, but what if I was to tell you that this man is this story's interpretation of Henry Emily? We follow the story of Tape Girl, a mysterious character who sends us cassette tapes talking all about an incident that happened there, an incident regarding the game itself and what's going on with the game. Obviously, from face value, the game is simple. You know, somebody got possessed by this glitch in the system, they killed themselves, and then now this person is getting infected too, and then obviously it transmits to you, you get infected, that's the end of the game. That's the basis on the surface level. But what's the lore meaning in the long run? Thanks to the DLC of this game, Curse of Dreadbear, we can actually figure out the meaning behind this game and what it's supposed to represent. I mean, let's think about it for a second. These VR games are supposed to be hyped up versions of the original Five Nights at Freddy's games. And I don't know about you, but in the mind of a child, anything can be terrifying. Anything can be scary. Anything can be who knows what. And perhaps that may be a hint. Perhaps that may be an indicator. Well, let's take a dive into the first VR beta tester, Jeremy. Now, there's been many Jeremys throughout the franchise. I mean, one of the main protagonists is Jeremy. In fact, also, one of the main dead kids who are possessing one of the main animatronics is also named Jeremy. So Jeremy is a very important name. I think this Jeremy is clearly and obviously an indication to the crying child, and that the story that we are seeing is a replication, a rewrite, a retelling of the crying child's death and demise. Think about it for a second. These games, in the mind of a child, would be absolutely crazy and not the same, especially with the glitch running around making things more distorted. Jeremy is seeing not what we see from the game, because there's something in the game, in the coding, that's more terrifying. But tomorrow he has to beta test again, and tomorrow's another day, and he has to do it again and again. And how exactly does Jeremy's story end? Oh yeah, with his face getting sliced off with a paper guillotine cutter. Whose face also got chomped off and eventually flatlined? Oh yeah, the crying child. And if you don't believe me that Help Wanted is telling the story of the crying child, let's look at Curse of Dreadbear. What is Curse of Dreadbear all about? Obviously, Curse of Dreadbear is a reference to the crying child, to the death of the crying child, and what it's supposed to represent overall in the game. Dreadbear is the crying child, being put back together, being brought back to life like a Frankenstein monster that it is. But we're missing an important, crucial detail. Before we even get to the Curse of Dreadbear DLC, something important happens in the ending of Help Wanted. Something very key to the story. Vanessa, our main character of Help Wanted, is a blonde with green eyes. Now obviously you think I may be referencing Elizabeth, maybe I'm referencing a new character, maybe I'm referencing Circus Baby in some way. What if I was to tell you Vanessa is none of that? MatPat? Elizabeth bots? Hell no. What if Vanessa is just Vanessa? Well, obviously we know that. We know that Vanessa turns out to be Vanny thanks to the confirmation of the character encyclopedia, which in fact is a canon book, so I'm taking it seriously. I don't care if it has mistakes, or retcons, if you will. I'm taking it seriously nonetheless. What I'm also taking seriously is the fact that Vanessa, when she becomes Vanny, she is possessed by Afton, a dark force that is corrupting her mind, making her think about her past, specifically from a perspective when she was a little girl getting abused by her father and being forced to say something about her mother in court. Now obviously this could be indicating towards, I don't know, maybe Elizabeth and her father William, who is a secondary name to Bill, or perhaps it's a reference to Crying Child, or perhaps it's a reference to Michael. We don't really know who this is referencing, but what if I was to tell you that what Vanessa is seeing in her mind and what it's being told is actually Afton's life, Afton's childhood, the things that happened in court with Afton's father and mother. Because what happens at the end of Help Wanted is Vanessa being corrupted, being consumed, and merging alongside Afton, being possessed and locked away behind a metal door and key by Glitchtrap. However, if you play the mobile version of FNAF Help Wanted, we see a different version of this. We see Vanessa going along in an arcade game called Princess Quest. And as she goes along, eventually she reaches the ending point of Princess Quest, with her being consumed by Afton, being consumed by the darkness, or maybe you could say, being consumed by the madness. Because what is being presented to you is Afton being consumed by madness, by the grief of losing his son from the bite of 83. What we are seeing is a retelling of the Five Nights at Freddy's story. And if you think it ends there, oh buddy, it goes into the next 2 games. If Curse of Dreadbear is supposed to represent putting the crying child back together, then the next piece of the story is supposed to represent the next piece of the timeline. Not just this timeline, but the previous FNAF timeline, the original FNAF timeline. What happens next? Vanessa goes to therapy. She visits a therapist time and time again. But slowly she's losing it. Over time becoming more dull, more possessed, becoming more corrupted. And we see this through FNAF AR messages and emails as well, showing how Afton originally was being consumed by this madness, consumed by this dark void in his heart from losing his son. And what seems to happen to every single therapist? They die. But they don't just die. They die in a specific way. They all get spring locked. The same way in the Twisted Ones, how the bodies are found by Charlie and Detective Clark. The same way how the bodies are discovered in the Twisted Ones by Charlie and Detective Burke. Mangled, ripped to shreds, with holes in their bodies. Clearly, this is an indication to the spring lock failures. As the creation of the mall is going on in Security Breach, this is a clear reference to the past. The same past where Phone Guy in FNAF 3 tells us about the spring lock failures of the sister location of Afton Robotics. We are seeing the next stage of Afton after he loses his mind, goes into madness, begins to create his own robotics for revenge, to create his own robotics and create his own life to lure a specific child, not just any child, Charlie. Charlotte Emily, Henry Emily's daughter. That is what is referenced in the novel trilogy, and that is what is happening in the game timeline as well. Think about this for a second. In the novel trilogy, the sister location bunker, or some kind of sister location is built directly under Henry Emily's house, and the Twisted One animatronics are built specifically to lure and capture Charlie. Now, I'm not saying that the novel trilogy is the same as the game timeline. Hell no. But I'm saying that they have very close similarities, as this is an alternate timeline. So obviously, in the same timeline, we may be seeing the same thing. We may not be seeing human robots, but we may be seeing a similar story of robots being created to specifically lure a specific child away from their home into the underground to be captured and killed. We are witnessing Afton trying to get back at Henry Emily by luring Charlotte away and killing her. However, obviously, it doesn't seem to be working, as the spring lock failures keep going off and things don't seem to be working out so well for him. FNAF AR Special Delivery, whilst it's not exactly canon or mainline, it is still serving a purpose. It is clearly referencing the sister location animatronics, the fun times, the Afton robotics, how they are sent to house for parties and birthday parties and special occasions. This may not be the canon of what is happening in universe, but in the original timeline, this is what happened. They were supposed to be sent to parties, sent to have special occasions. This is a clear indication that the animatronics that were sent to the therapist's house are supposed to represent the fun time animatronics in the original timeline, which means that the spring lock failures are directly tied to the sister location, just like in the FNAF 3 calls. And as a matter of fact, Tape Girl is similar in a lot of ways to the original phone guy. She talks directly to you about certain situations going on in the business, and over time she becomes a little bit corporate. Regardless of the fact, we move on to Five Nights at Freddy's security breach. However, before I even get into the mess of security breach, there is one important story to talk about, and that is GGY. I know what you're thinking. What is GGY? Or maybe you already know what GGY is at this point. GGY is a Tales from the Pizzaplex story that is directly linked to the main story that leads into Security Breach. It talks about a little boy who goes by the name of Dr. Rab, who is clearly a manipulator and mastermind, and is the same person as GGY, a kid who plays at an arcade within the Pizzaplex. It is also implied that Dr. Rab, aka GGY, is supposedly Patient 46, the one pulling the strings, the mastermind behind everything, the one who had a great childhood until certain things went astray. What went astray? Well, Gregory got possessed. I know what you're thinking. You probably were going to think that I was going to say Gregory is a robot. Nah, Matt Pat, get that shit out of here. This is a retelling of the original FNAF timeline, and I don't know about you, but the original Charlie is not a robot. Well, I hope not, anyway. Based off of GGY, this is what is implied. It is implied that Gregory was kidnapped or lured in some way or capacity. The same way how the fun times were supposed to lure a child. Specifically, I don't know, maybe Charlotte Emily? And eventually he gets possessed by Glitch Trap. He gets taken control of, and he becomes the mastermind, luring Vanessa by using his hacking skills to hack into the main system of the Pizzaplex and get Vanessa a top spot in the job, becoming a security guard, and keeping Gregory locked up in a posted room. Now, something interesting to note about that posted room, I don't know about you, but that posted room has a door, and in the files, that door is called the Charlie door. And even the door in and of itself looks very familiar to a door in the novels, one of the 4 closets in the novels that was supposed to represent the different ages of the Charlie bots. But we never got an explanation why it is called Charlie door. Why is this door called the Charlie door? As a matter of fact, why are we seeing references to Charlie's past, including certain color bracelets that match the bracelet coatings from Pizzeria Simulator? Well, perhaps Maybe it's because now Security Breach is telling the story of the next event in the original timeline. Charlotte Emily's death. Gregory is the new Charlotte Emily in this timeline. Now, that doesn't mean that he is possessed by Charlotte. I know it gets a little confusing because this is a sequel while also being a reboot, but stick with me. Here's what we got so far. Help 1 is supposed to represent the creation of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Jeremy, the beta tester of the game, is supposed to represent the crying child, who interprets something in the game as something perhaps corrupt, evil, I don't know, scary perhaps, and eventually gets his face cut off the same way that the crying child gets bit in the Bite 83. After dying, Jeremy's death then serves a purpose for Vanessa. Vanessa represents William Afton in this timeline, as she is possessed by William Afton, the same way how William Afton in the original FNAF timeline is corrupted by madness, darkness, the void of evil, as he grieves over the death of his son. The Curse of Dreadbear DLC follows this up by as Afton tries everything in his power to resurrect the crying child, put the pieces back together, to no true real avail. Well, no avail from what he can see anyway. Or perhaps maybe he can see it. Perhaps maybe he could determine it. Perhaps he did bring back the crying child, and now the crying child is possessing the animatronic Fredbear. And perhaps maybe that is why in the Curse of Dreadbear DLC you successfully resurrect the Frankenstein monster that is Dreadbear, and eventually don the mask. A killer's mask. One that will be synonymous, a rabbit mask to go on a killing spree. Vanessa dons it in Help Wanted, the same way that William Afton dons it to eventually start years of torment and pain for many young innocent lives. To fill in the gaps, therapy tapes, as well as Special Delivery, a non-mainline game, tell you the story of certain events that happen alongside that eventually lead to the next event. The creation of Afton Robotics, the spring lock failures of the Funtime animatronics not being perfectly able to be created, the capability of luring a child, possessing that child, or in the case of the original timeline, luring that child to demise, unsuccessful, as Gregory resurrects from this possessed state, and now you play as Gregory in Security Breach. Gregory is supposed to represent Charlotte Emily, and if you want more proof in terms of that, well, I got a few things up my sleeve just for you. Besides the Charlie door, look at Gregory for a second. Take a good look at Gregory. Now, you remember what I said earlier about Scott Cawthon resembling or supposed to be the interpretation of Henry Emily, somebody who goes insane. He initially caused the death of Jeremy as he created this fantasy and fun life to escape whatever issues he was going through. Look at Scott Cawthon. Look at Gregory. Is there a resemblance in their designs, their looks? Perhaps maybe too good. Now, I want you to look at something that is in one of the previous games. This right here is Scott's son. But of course in the game, Ultimate Custom Night, this is supposed to represent the vengeful spirit, aka most likely Cassidy. However, look at Gregory for a second. Now, I'm not going to sit here and imply that Gregory is Cassidy or whatever the fuck, so don't get confused on that part. Stay the course. What I'm simply implying here is that Gregory is clearly and obviously a resemblance of Charlotte Emily, because if Scott Cawthon is supposed to be the Henry Emily of this timeline, of this story, then Gregory is supposed to be Charlotte Emily, the daughter, or I guess in this case the son of the creator of this fantasy and fun. And it's something convenient how Scott's real life son looks just like Gregory. Coincidence? I think not. Now, there's been a lot of debate on which ending of Security Breach is the real ending of Security Breach. There's so many different endings that you can get in Security Breach. It's honestly very puzzling which one could possibly be it. However, thanks to the score names, we can figure out that whichever ending is the real ending, which is labeled as Happy True Ending, plays this song. So whichever ending with this song is the real ending. And what's one of the endings that has this song as the credit theme? The alleyway ending. What if the simplest, basic ending, the alleyway ending, is the real ending? Think about it for a second. I know you're thinking about, but what about the Blob? But what about Burn Trap? what about them? Do they even exist? Or was that just for the purpose of the game? Just to have fun? Just to throw in an Easter egg? For example, Dee Dee in Ultimate Custom Night. Is Dee Dee real? Clearly she looks like the FNAF World version of her, but she's not actually there. It's just for fun. It's just for laughs and giggles. So what if Burn Trap and the Blob are the same thing? I mean, let's look at the character encyclopedia. These are not the canon names of these characters. Why is that? Why are these not the canon names of these characters if Scott has time and time again named the characters based off of what the fans have called the character? Perhaps it's because these characters are not officially real ones. They are not officially canon ones. They are not canon characters. That is why it says non-canon name. And that is probably because the alleyway ending is the real ending of Security Breach. The ending where you say goodbye to Freddy and you run off. The same way how in the FNAF 2 minigame, you are outside in an alleyway and look who comes to find you, Vanny. The same way Charlotte Emily dies. It is once again continuing Afton's story. Afton's memories are being played out through Vanessa as she gets her first kill. The first kill deliberately by her own hands. I mean, it's practically identical. Freddy Fazbear is the one who says goodbye to you. You end up in the almost identical alleyway that Charlotte ends up in. And you die the same way that Charlotte dies, by the killer finishing you off. It's practically lined up perfectly just for you to try and figure out. And if you want one last key piece of evidence to prove this, look at the Ruin DLC poster. What color coding does Gregory have that says help me? Green. The same color coding Charlotte has when she dies. And in the Security Breach, what is heavily implied throughout the entire game? Who is the thing that is watching over us? The Nightmarion plushie. You can find it in hidden spots, always watching you, because this is a clear indication and memory to the puppet, because the true puppet master, Patient 46, GGY Gregory, is born here in Security Breach. So now that I've told you the story of Help Wanted, Security Breach, and Special Delivery, and how it's a retelling of the original FNAF timeline through Afton's eyes, through Afton's perspective, he is manipulating time once again to recreate the events of his past, of his memory, the agony, recreating the memories of the anguish of Afton, or whatever the hell it's described in the books. I don't really know the agony all too much. Now, we are witnessing it in real time. And in the Ruin DLC poster, what can we take from it? Well, let's see. First thing I notice is the girl. The girl is very important and very special because in the same story that I told you that Gregory is Patient 46 and is being possessed by Afton, getting controlled, is called Amelia. Now that name may not be very familiar, but her character is very brief and very short in the actual GGY story. Amelia is found playing Fruity Maze, and eventually she is carted off by one of the employees or something like that. She's taken out of the building and she just wants to play one more time to finish the game. And so now Amelia is entering the Pizzaplex in the Ruin DLC. It's going to shambles. It's crumbling down. Maybe because the building is old, maybe because something happened before. Who knows? Here's what I do know though. This is the beginning of the missing children's incident. Amelia is supposed to represent Susie. But what if I was to tell you that the Ruin DLC is supposed to mark where we need to step in, where we need to change the events of time? We need to prevent the missing children's incident from happening. We need to prevent Amelia and whatever 4 kids are going to die by the hands of Afton through the hands of Vanessa, of Vanny once more. We need to stop this. We need to prevent history from repeating itself again. We need to save Amelia. We need to save Gregory. We need to save them by playing a specific arcade game. What arcade game? Oh yeah, the Balloon Boy arcade game. Why is that arcade game very important? Well, what is the first mini game in the events of mini games that you have to play to unlock Happiest Day? Oh yeah, Balloon Boy. Because what we are about to do in the Ruin DLC or in maybe FNAF 10, who knows, what's coming next is preventing history from repeating itself and is finally putting an end to this story once and for all with the help of everything that we've got up to this point.
Eat your green vegetables.
FNAF World is probably one of the strangest entries in the entire franchise, especially considering the fact that it's an RPG spin-off, but at the same time it's also a canon game somehow, which makes you wonder, how is an RPG spin-off canon if it has no direct ties, which makes you think that, okay, this is some kind of elusive dream of some kind or some kind of spirit realm of the actual game, because it's not actually real. Or is it? What is known about FNAF World is that it has a lot of the key elements and points in the story of the actual timeline, including the likes of the Happiest Day minigame, which the entire game is seemingly based around, Old Man Consequences, who serves a big purpose at the end of Ultimate Custom Night, and even the Halloween DLC with the Rainbow and the Foxy.exe serves some kind of lore relevance and purpose in the overall story. I mean, why else would the Rainbow from FNAF World appear in the graphic novels of the novel trilogy? There has to be something. I mean, maybe it's an Easter egg, maybe it's for fun, but the fact that it's specifically placed there, just very strange to me, which is where this theory comes into play. If in Ruin DLC, Amelia comes to the Pizzaplex in Ruin to go play Fruity Maze, or maybe she comes across the Balloon Boy minigame, and she plays the Balloon Boy minigame, then essentially she is starting the chain of events of playing the same minigames in FNAF 3. And as we know, there's always a glitch in the FNAF 3 minigames, and if you glitch the games, you can give cake to certain dead children, and you do it 5 times to give the cake to each of the 5 dead children. And then of course you get the 6th child at the very end with the puppet, the marionette, coming by to give cake to the last kid. So if Gregory is this specific story's Charlotte Emily, or marionette, if you will, then that means we need to take certain context clues from Happiest Day to figure out what's going on in the follow-up of this Ruin DLC. Now, something very interesting to note in the Tales from the Pizzaplex is that everything that Glitchtrap and the virus is linked to is a tree in the middle of the Pizzaplex that is seemingly like a wire base of everything connected to every single outlet of some kind of source of video or whatever the fuck, where Glitchtrap travels through the Pizzaplex and infects everything. Now, where have we also seen a tree of some sort exist in the FNAF games? Oh yeah, that's right, the Balloon Boy minigame. This very thing right above that seems to look like a, I don't know what the hell that's supposed to be, is what we always thought was a tree. And it's almost convenient how the Pizzaplex has a tree, and the only minigame we know from the Happiest Day that exists in the Pizzaplex is the Balloon Boy minigame, which is very telling. I mean, in the actual Balloon Boy minigame from Security Breach in and of itself, something very strange to note is that we have something in the background. The Sun and Moon character is in the background and is very creepy, and it glitches out from time to time, does these things. John, or FNAF, pointed out that this is a direct, almost direct reference to Foxy.exe, where you, as the player, just walk through at a straight line with a big Foxy just staring in the background, who says a lot of lines of dialogue that match the exact lines of Glitchtrap. Now, Sun and Moon as a character in general is a very interesting character indeed. There's a lot of parallels to Sun and Moon to William Afton and back and forth. Hell, even one of the key moments in the game that you may have completely missed because the game is so bad it doesn't even really focus on it, is Freddy gets kidnapped by Sun and Moon. He gets completely bodied and dragged away by Sun and Moon whilst following Gregory, which is very familiar. Now, if Gregory represents Charlotte Emily, aka the marionette, where have we seen a Freddy of some sort following the marionette and then gets got? Oh yeah, that's right. So obviously, the games in and of itself is clearly referencing certain mini-games from the past, which is why the Balloon Boy minigame is very interesting to me, because if this is the catalyst to the Happiest Day minigames, all the FNAF 3 minigames, then that means we're going to see multiple different minigames, including the likes of the Mangle minigame, which involves Mangle going around and giving cake. And something to note in the Mangle minigame is that we see a giant marionette silhouette, which is very interesting because this character is known as Shadow Puppet, but we never actually get to know anything about Shadow Puppet. Well, what if the Shadow Puppet is a reference to the fact that Gregory is trapped inside the game? Toy Chica's minigame is next. And now, I don't really know if there's anything in Security Breach that hints at the fact that there's a Toy Chica minigame or whatever, but I do know that Glamrock Chica is in the poster for Ruin DLC. And in Security Breach, there's cut content, specifically a Glamrock Chica minigame of some sort. I don't know what the minigame is, but there is a song attached to this minigame called Concealed Coolness. Now, I find it very interesting how Glamrock Chica has her own minigame of some sort. I know that all the Glamrocks were supposed to have it, but this one was specifically cut, yet the music track and certain other things are still in the files directly referencing Glamrock Chica, which makes me think, is Glamrock Chica supposed to reference Toy Chica in the Ruin DLC? Because if that's so, then that plays into the second minigame, which means that if Gregory is trapped in the glitch reality world, the game world, or wherever the fuck he is right now, in this monitors, and he's supposed to represent the character of the marionette, the puppet master, whatever, then that means that Gregory is likely the one who is glitching through these games, the same way that in FNAF World you do similar thing, playing the mini games over again, which I find very interesting and very intriguing, because then the third mini game is supposed to be Mangle's Quest. And Mangle's Quest tells the story of putting Mangle back together again, but we don't have any clearance or talks about Mangle. The only thing we know that has Mangle in it is the blob. Who knows? But like I said, if the Ruin DLC is supposed to represent two things happening at the same time, which is one, the retelling and the rewriting of the missing children's incident, starting with Amelia and then whatever the next 4 kids are going to be, the next 4 victims, whilst also telling the story of Happiest Day, and Gregory perhaps playing as the marionette in this role, going through and trying to put the pieces back together to fix something or someone, then perhaps FNAF 10 is exactly what they said it may be. You see, Five Nights at Freddy's 10, we don't know anything about FNAF 10. We don't even know if there is going to be a FNAF 10 because Steel Wool has not said anything, except for the fact that Steel Wool is very intrigued, very interested in making a Fredbear's Family Diner game. Now, my memory is not that great, but what is one of the mini games in the FNAF 3 mini games? Oh yeah, that's right. Stage 1, starring Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. I find it all too convenient how that's the next mini game, or I say the 4th minigame out of the 5 or 6 minigames that you play in FNAF 3, which implies that FNAF 10 most likely is indeed going to be a Fredbear Family Diner game. But it's not going to be what I originally thought it was. It's likely going to be a minigame of continuing the FNAF 3 minigames in this storyline. If it continues the story, then Fredbear plays a role in trying to give cake to the 4th child. And what is the 5th minigame? The 5th minigame is Shadow Bonnie. But something to note about Shadow Bonnie is that out of all the character appearances, Shadow Bonnie looks the most different than he ever has. I mean, Shadow Bonnie is clearly supposed to be a black silhouette of Toy Bonnie with white eyes and white teeth. But in the FNAF 3 minigame, he's purple and he's glitching. Where have I seen that before? Now I know what you're thinking. FNAF 10, Fredbear's Family Diner. fourth minigame, aka. It's supposed to be in-game, in the actual minigame, but it's played like a game in a game in a game. So it's very meta and very confusing. But then we get to the fifth stage of the FNAF 3 minigames, of the story anyway, which is Shadow Bonnie. So if Shadow Bonnie represents Glitch Trap, then why is Glitch Trap helping the kids all of a sudden? He's the villain. He's the main villain of this whole narrative. William Afton has been the antagonist. Unless there's something else going on here. Unless we are putting the pieces back together, and the more we put them back together, the more we are not saving the crying child. The more we're not putting the memories back of the crying child and sparing him, the more we're saving Afton. I mean, think about it for a second. Afton is being brought back by Agony. Agony is what represents Afton right now, which Agony is supposed to be like the dark remnant in this universe timeline, which is supposed to be like a dark aura of dark spirits. And what is the one character that happens to have dark remnants on him? Oh yeah, Shadow Bonnie. So if Shadow Bonnie represents Glitch Trap, then that means the more that we collect Light Remnant by playing the games, glitching the games, and bringing them back together, then at some point in time, maybe we are going to glitch the system, or maybe you could say hack the system, as perhaps Gregory, who is, remember, in this story, he's representing the marionette. He's not actually possessed by Charlie, he's just representing the marionette. And perhaps Gregory is going to glitch into the glitch itself.
Okay, so he's electric. He's like a battery. So what happens if you overcharge a battery?
It explodes.
Right.
So we use his power against him. Perfect. Okay.
I think I can reconnect the power lines, but what I need you to do, I need you to reset the system. Okay, when I say you turn that power on, you turn it on. No matter what.
Peter.
No matter what.
And using the glitch itself puts the final piece of the puzzle back together and gives the final cake to the last child. And then of course you have the only minigame left in the FNAF timeline, Happiest Day. And what is Happiest Day? It is the marionette gifting the last cake to Golden Freddy, freeing the spirits that are being held. So if Gregory is the puppet master, the hacker, the one pulling all the strings, then that means Gregory is also going to be the one to end everything. But if Gregory's captured and he's also potentially maybe dead or who knows what, then how does he do it? And who exactly is he freeing? The only spirit left. The only spirit who has not been freed. Cassidy. Cassidy has been sticking around for quite some time. You see, Cassidy doesn't know how to let go of grief, exactly. Let go of that anger. It's still vengeful. She's still very vengeful of Afton. She's been vengeful. That's why she created a personal hell to fuck over Afton again and again and again, time and time again, until Afton actually succeeds in beating her at her own game and manages to get freed through what was it, a computer virus of some sort? You know, it's getting so confusing that you may not even be able to catch up with me at this point. But Cassidy is still around. And as a matter of fact, in the actual game files, Cassidy's name is listed specifically as the princess in Princess Quest. But how can that be? Because in Help Wanted, I clearly stated that Vanessa is represented of the Princess in Princess Quest because it's telling the story of how Afton descends into madness, right? But that was Help Wanted. Now we're in Security Breach. Now we're at Princess Quest 2. In Princess Quest 2, their character now has a sword. No longer a torch, a light. Now has a sword and is slaying people, and there is an orange motherfucker who looks similar to Old Man Consequences. You see, as you play Princess Quest 2, and you play Princess Quest 3, if Princess is indeed Cassidy, then you go and you free Vanessa from her prison. Princess Quest 2 and 3 is supposed to represent Help Wanted and the fact that Vanessa's actually there behind a locked door, and that means that the spirit of Cassie is just kind of wandering outside until she opens the door and essentially frees Vanessa from Glitch Trap. by attacking Glitchtrap again. But we don't get a chance to do that in the actual real story because we don't get a chance to actually save Vanessa. So that means Cassidy is just kind of stuck lingering. And if you actually beat 50-20, or I guess 49-20, but if this was indeed the ending to 50-20, then we would beat Golden Freddy at the game in Ultimate Custom, which means that we beat Cassidy at her own game, which means that we overcome Cassidy, and that's how Afton takes control. That's what I said earlier. So this of course implies that in FNAF 10, if it is this Fredbear Family Diner, if we do play the 4th and 5th minigame of playing as Fredbear, playing as Shadow Bonnie aka Glitchtrap, and freeing and getting to Happiest Day, then that means Happiest Day is Gregory freeing Cassidy's spirit once and for all by letting the demon handle his demons and letting her soul rest once and for all. We interrupt this program to bring you Future Rex with information that he missed the first time round. How you doing? Future me here. What I have to say is indeed important. It refers to what I just been talking about for the past 20 or so minutes. You know how I just made the revelation that Help Wanted, Special Delivery, and Security Breach are telling the story of the first incidences in the FNAF timeline, including the Bite 83, Charlotte's death, and leading up to the Missing Children's incident with Ruin DLC? You know how I also kind of hinted at the fact that we get to save the missing children and essentially prevent the rest of the FNAF timeline? I know what you're probably thinking. Okay, if we prevent the rest of the FNAF timeline, then what does that mean? We prevent FNAF 2, FNAF 1, FNAF Sister Location, and FNAF 3 and Pizzeria Simulator. We essentially prevent the entirety of Five Nights at Freddy's. But something I discovered when making this video that's actually caused me to take a little longer than I was supposed to was the fact that not only can you view Help Wanted, Special Delivery, and Security Breach as the beginning of the FNAF timeline, but you can also view it as the middle of the FNAF timeline. Now I know what you're thinking. What do you mean by that? Well, let's see Help Wanted for a second. Help Wanted is about a game developer who went rogue and they fired him. And then they hired a new beta tester to play the game. His name, conveniently, Jeremy. And he conveniently also gets his face cut off with a guillotine paper cutter. Where have I heard that story from before? Oh yeah, that's right, FNAF 2. A guard previously worked in FNAF 2 and then replaced by Jeremy, and then Jeremy gets his face bitten off. How convenient. And then what happens? Then Jeremy is replaced by Tape Girl, aka the resemblance of Phone Guy in this timeline. So then obviously Tape Girl comes next, which is resembling of how Phone Guy takes the night shift next and becomes the next in line. And then eventually you, playing as the main character, get next in line. And as the main character, you play a certain game, Five Nights at Freddy's 1. The same way how Mike Schmidt then takes charge and plays Five Nights at Freddy's 1 inside the pizzeria, inside the establishment. Then what comes next? You follow some instructions, you are lured into the Princess Quest minigame, and you are eventually corrupted and possessed. The same way how Glitchtrap merges with you. The same way how Mike was lured into the underground sister location bunker and eventually scooped. Something to also note is that Curse of Dreadbear could perhaps potentially be a reference to Five Nights at Freddy's 4, going through the nightmare that is the Curse of Dreadbear. Hell, even in the Curse of Dreadbear DLC, you go through the bedroom, a FNAF 4 minigame. Then of course next is Special Delivery, representative of how the sister location animatronics are now free to roam around, aka Ennard. How Ennard is free to roam around and do what he needs to do. Then you, as Gregory, whoever Gregory's supposed to represent, is being pulled on a string, possessed, the same way how Michael Afton is possessed in the original timeline. And then eventually you break out of the possession. And eventually you now have to search around, playing around in the security breach setting to find, guess who? Burntrap, the same way how Michael Afton was searching for Springtrap, which then of course leads to the FNAF 3 type of game, where you fight Burntrap in the ending. This of course culminates to the Blob capturing Burntrap, the same way how I personally believe that Afton merged himself with Golden Freddy, which is why he looks the way he does in Pizzeria Simulator. I mean, just look at that face. That screams a Golden Freddy face right there. I don't know about you, but this was something I always thought, is that Afton sewed his suit with Golden Freddy's suit. So if that's the case, then the Afton amalgamation with the Blob and Burn Trap is supposed to represent that in this variation of the timeline. But as you know, I also mentioned the alleyway was the real ending of Security Breach, which means that if this is the non-canon version, then that means that when we eventually go to the Ruin DLC and prevent the missing children's incident, we are essentially preventing the second half of the story, which is the entirety of playing Five Nights at Freddy's. Then, of course, if you're still going off of the middle to the end of the timeline with this representation, that means Ruin DLC can only mean Pizzeria Simulator, the final resting place, the final end and conclusion. And then this, of course, leads to the Fredbear game that I was mentioning. And what would that represent? That would represent Ultimate Custom Night, the same way how Golden Freddy has you captured in an eternal hell. Now, something very interesting to note is how crazy both of these line up. Help Wanted, Special Delivery, and Security Breach represent two completely different placements of the timeline, yet the ending point and the ending mark represents the same thing, which is very intriguing to me. How if we go to the Ruin DLC and we prevent the missing children's incident, then we prevent the second half of the timeline. The same way how in the second representation of the DLC, we end Five Nights at Freddy's with the Pizzeria Simulator ending. That's way too convenient how they perfectly line up, and it makes me wonder how many parallels are in the original FNAF timeline. Like, does this mean that the Bite of 83 was a foreshadowing of the Bite of 87? Does this mean that both Michael and the Crying Child did in fact go through Five Nights at Freddy's 4? I mean, it is heavily referenced that is the case. Does this mean that the security guard that takes the place in Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is potentially Phone Guy, Fritz, who's potentially covering up everything? The same way how a business is supposed to cover up? And that's why he gets quote-unquote fired for tampering with the animatronics, the same way how Tape Girl is suddenly vanished all of a sudden when she took charge and you don't really know what happened with her. So many parallels. It's honestly crazy how many parallels there are. While you think about that, here I'm going to go back to the past, jumping through time to tell you the ending that I believe FNAF is going to be. Now back to our weekly scheduled program. And that, I think, is going to be the true ending of FNAF. Resting Cassidy's soul, resting Afton's soul in the bottomless pit of hell, and everything finally ends. Now, I don't know how they're going to fix everything up. It's like, okay, Afton's gone, but now what? Like, how are you going to fix all that up? Perhaps maybe all of this was just a memory, a bad dream. Maybe some things are left best forgotten. And perhaps maybe we're going to have like a twist in the FNAF 10 ending. And it's like Dream 3 was real, but it was not Crying Child's dream. It was Afton's dream. Afton's dream as he descended into madness. So now he wakes up, all his kids are alive, and nothing happened, nobody died, and he's like the happiest motherfucker ever, you know. You see those cliche movies where it's like, oh, it was all a dream, but now, you know, I'm going to be a better person, do my life much better. Honestly, that would be funny. And in a way, it could spawn the alternate timelines. It could spawn the novel trilogy timeline. It could spawn the Fazbear Frights timeline. It could spawn the game timeline. It could spawn the movie timeline. If that is the case, it could also spawn alternate universes, such as the FNAF fanverse. Maybe the FNAF fanverse in this alternate universe of going through the spirit realm of the games and FNAF world and of time. It's almost like a time travel, similar to a time traveling ball pit. Okay, now I'm stretching, but essentially what I'm saying is that the ending of FNAF likely is going to be the happiest day, but not the original happiest day. The new happiest day, the new variation, a hacker, Gregory, hacking into the coding, defeating Glitchtrap at his game, and freeing both Cassidy and Afton once and for all, and ending the story once and for all. And perhaps now we could see the light at the end of the tunnel. The rainbow following the storm, as we see FNAF Worlds events fully playing out. Or I should say, Update 2's events. Fully playing out exactly as sequenced and planned. This marking the true end to Scott's story, Scott's tale, and the end of Five Nights at Freddy's altogether. And there's no mysteries left untouched. You ever feel like you forget something? You know, like something very crucial, very important.
Dude, I just got done reading the Fazbear fight, and at the end,
It's only now that I understand the depth of the Fazbear's creatures.
How the hell?
What he had already done wasn't enough.
Come on,
No.
Humiliate, destroy.
No! No!
I guess you forgot about me.
No!